Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I want to thank you and the members on both sides of the aisles and the staff for putting together a very good appropriation bills for FY24. I think we'll do the same for FY25. But I certainly want to say thank you to the Secretary. I want to say thank you to the work that you do, your men and women that do the work every single day. As you know, I always say I don't go visit the border. I live at the border. But I did go on the riverboat just last week, less than a week ago, with Border Patrol. We talked about the importance of getting rid of carrizo cane so they can see river roads, which are so important to us, technology that are so important to us. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you and your men and women do across the country. I do want to say, looking at the numbers for the last 21 days, in between ports, there are about 3,800 a day. 3,800 a day. You add the CBP, maybe add a little bit over 1,000, so you're talking about 5,000 a day, but 3,800 a day coming in. Very different. So we're doing something right, and I ask you to continue to looking at what we need to do to bring those numbers down. 3,800 in between ports a day for the last 3 weeks. So let's continue doing that. I do agree with the chairman. We did fund 41,500 beds. Don't want to speak for anybody else, but I do support 41,500 beds. I do support the charter air for ICE, and I certainly want to ask you about that. And somewhere down the line, I certainly want to ask you about what the president's looking at. I've always felt that president can do an executive order. My understanding is that there is talk about another executive order, because if you get 100 people that ask for asylum, at the end of the day, they go to a judge 4, 5, 6 years later, 87 to 90% are going to be rejected. So we got to do something at the very beginning. If they don't qualify for those 5 reasons, persecution by the state on those 5 reasons, I think we need to look at that. If we do, if the president does that, I'm sure there'll be a court case by some folks that don't agree with him. But we certainly have to look at that. So I certainly want to say thank you. I hope that on the 22,000 Border Patrol agents that we had, I hope that y'all look at the polygraph. That's been a big problem. I talked to the Border Patrol. Whoever that vendor is, and hopefully they're listening to me, we got to do something about that. And certainly, because if we don't hire people, I know at one time, even under the Trump administration, we were losing more people to attrition than we were hiring Border Patrol. So we got to do a better job on that. Certainly want to say, the technology that we're looking at is very, very important. I do want to say there is a court order, and let me see if we can put a little bit of more legislative intent here, where a recent injunction by a federal judge in my home state, who I think is wrongly interpreting the congressional intent of funding, provided border barrier assistance for fiscal years 2020 and 21. If you look at the language, Congress purposely chose the broader system, the word system language, to intend that it was to fund a system and not just a vertical wall. So that means, because of this injunction, we can't do river roads that are so key to Border Patrol, lighting, border technology. They're all on hold. And if this funding is lapsed, then we got to come back and reappropriate that while we have funding right now. So I hope you all appeal that injunction. And again, I have questions, but I just want to say to all your men and women that are under Homeland Security, I just want to say thank you for the job. 3,800 a day, in between ports. Then you add, what comes to CBP, close to 5,000. But in between ports is what we're focusing on. Continue doing and let us know what we need to do to make sure we do that. And certainly to close up, Mexico has been a partner. And whatever you need to do to make sure they continue doing what they're doing, less numbers of people come to the northern border, then the numbers go down, working with the enforcement levels that you're doing. So I certainly encourage you to continue working with Mexico on that. With that, Mr. Chairman and members, thank you so much. And Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. Secretary Mayorkas. Recognize the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Cuellar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've been to Texas. You've seen the border wall, the levee wall, so we have up there. When somebody's asking for asylum, don't they all have to do is just touch the riverbank?
Once they step on United States soil, Ranking Member Cuellar, they have a lawful right to claim asylum.
And since we have a 1,200-mile river, the fences that we have are not in the middle of the river, which is really the international boundary. They're not at the river banks, but they're actually a quarter mile or even longer away, correct?
In certain places, that is indeed correct.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you, according to the numbers that I've seen from y'all, most of the drugs that we have coming in are coming through ports of entry. Meth, cocaine, fentanyl, up to 94% are coming through ports of entry. Is that correct?
With respect to the southern border, yes, that is correct. I believe it is our data, our intelligence and analysis demonstrate that approximately 90%, if not more, of the drugs entering the country through the border arrive through or smuggled in through the ports of entry.
So I certainly ask you that whatever monies that we added for technology, the non-intrusive, move on that as much as possible so we can have them not only at the ports of entry, but also in the Border Patrol checkpoints also. I would ask you to move those as soon as possible. And according to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, 86 to 87% of the people are smuggling drugs at the ports of entry or at the checkpoints are U.S. citizens, correct?
I'm not certain about the precise percentage, but I do understand that the data evidences that the majority are United States citizens.
The last numbers I saw were about 86, 87% U.S. citizens. Now, let me go back to, I'm a big believer in Expedited, Title VIII Expedited. What resources, I'll ask you again, like more asylum officers, space, do you need so we can do expedited removals under Title VIII?
Ranking Member Cuellar, in addition to additional legal authority, which we would have been provided under the bipartisan legislation, many more asylum officers, enforcement and removal officers in Immigration and Customs Enforcement, additional personnel, additional Customs and Border Protection personnel, additional facilities, and those are some of the highlights with respect to what we need. But underlying it is the additional legal authority that the bipartisan legislation would have delivered.
And we certainly want to provide you the funding. I just have to say this, Mr. Chairman. The two last appropriation bills where we added $1.4 billion to CBP, every single person on the other side of the aisle, except for two that are still in Congress, voted no for that extra money. This last appropriations bill, where we added the largest amount to CBP, I think less than half of the majority voted for funding. So we got to make sure that we all work together to do bipartisan funding to give you this. Now, the last question on expedited removal. Again, I believe in expedited removal, Title VIII. It was used very effectively when you were with the Obama administration under Secretary Jay Johnson. You said that the only way we can use CBP removal or Title VIII if they're under CBP custody. Would a monitoring system still be under CBP? And I guess you can't answer that, but I want you to think about it and go back to your attorneys to see if you can use Title VIII expedited removal because custody means probably under, ICE or CBP facility, but we do use monitoring, and I would ask you to see if you can look at that, whether that would be custody, which my opinion, I would say yes, and see if you can use Title VIII expedited removal. And again, anything that we can change the law, and I don't know what y'all are looking at, the executive order, but we do know that at the very beginning, a lot of those people don't qualify. They do not qualify, with all due respect. If they're hungry, they want a job, they want to come to the U.S. or the Chinese city on top of the hill, I understand that, but they don't qualify under the 5 persecution under asylum law. So we want to work with you. We want to supportive. And again, you have a very difficult job. There are so many opinions here. You get attacked because you do too much, or you get attacked for not doing enough. But I do want to say, I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank the men and women that work on your department. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
God bless.
Cuellar.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. We now recognize Mrs. Hinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, last year when you came before this
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today we're announcing a Democrats task force on border security. I think it's important for Democrats to talk about strong border security and still be respectful of immigrants' rights and values. For so long, the Republicans have had a narrative about the border being a dangerous place and out of control. And I think it's important that Democrats also have a narrative about border security. We care about border security. We know some of us live at the border, and we understand what the border is all about. It is also important to note that we're calling for action. We certainly want to see the Senate border deal pass. You know, Republicans have been calling for securing the border. Finally, there's a strong border deal done, and they don't want to bring it up for a vote itself, number one. Number two, I would like to remind folks that for the last two appropriation cycles, and I sit as a ranking member for Homeland Security on the appropriations, the last two appropriation cycles, where we added $2.4 billion for CBP, that is for Border Patrol, adding new agents, support staff, the bonuses, the retention, everything for border technology, $2.4 billion. Every single Republican that's still in the House, except for two that are still here, voted against putting money for border security. So again, it's not only talking about narratives, but it's taking action, and this is why we're here. We're asking to support funding for appropriations when it comes to Homeland, not like just only two of them, the last two election cycles, or should I say funding cycles, but also to put the Senate bill on the floor. So with
Mr. Cuellar for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, let's talk about the migrants who are released into the country after they've been processed and vetted by Border Patrol. One of the tools, legal tools that you have at your disposal is the use of expedited removal. And I do agree with you. If Congress would do its job and pass the Senate bill, that I think is the first time since 1996 that we actually make some changes, especially looking at the asylum criteria. And again, as I've said, 5 reasons: political, religion, et cetera, persecution by the state. You know, I was just at Holding Institute in Laredo, and we're talking to the folks there, and they said that most of them are coming in for economic reasons, even though they say asylum, but it's economic reasons. So one of the tools that we could provide to you if we pass the Senate deal, I mean, that I agree with you. But one of the other ones that you have is expedited removal, which is a process that is intended to identify those individuals and families who are truly seeking asylum, and to quickly remove the rest. However, as you know, it's where your men and women are unable to do that because we lack some of the resources, and that doesn't give you the options that I wish we had. So what I would ask you, if there's not enough space between CBP and ICE to hold folks through the full duration of the removal proceedings, if you had more asylum officers and processing capacity, would you put more migrants into expedited removal proceedings, and would that help you manage challenges at the border?
Ranking Member Cuellar, we issued a regulation, the asylum officer regulation, that gave greater power to our asylum officers, which enabled us to move more quickly through the asylum adjudication process. One major provision of the Senate bipartisan legislation that would have been so incredibly impactful was to allow us to apply expedited removal proceedings, a much more accelerated removal process, to individuals outside of immigration detention. Right now, for single adults, we are restricted to applying expedited removal to those in detention. That bipartisan legislation would have provided us with extraordinary enforcement tools, and I remain uncertain why it was not unanimously approved.
I agree with you. So just to make sure, so you cannot use expedited removal under Title VIII unless if they're detained.
That is my understanding of the law to the best of my recollection, Mr. Ranking Member.
Yes, sir. And we just don't have that processing space to keep all those folks. Is that correct?
Well, as Ranking Member Cuellar, as you noted, the number of encounters has dropped significantly over the past several months. The number of encounters does not in any way equal the number of detention beds that we have. The 2024 budget, I think, funded 41,500 detention beds, and we are encountering approximately 3,800 people in between the ports of entry over the past several weeks, as Mr. Chairman noted. So detention is not the only consequence delivery that we can issue. What is needed is the swift and fast removal of individuals who do not qualify for relief. The bipartisan legislation would have taken a 7-year asylum process, a 7+ year asylum process, and reduced it to as little as 90 days. That would have been a game changer.
So what, besides the Senate language, which I support, besides that, what resources would you need to increase your expedited removal operations to meet the demands that we anticipate? And keep in mind that in between ports, it's 3,800, at least for the last 3 weeks, 21 days average. What resources would you need, and how would you use that?
Ranking Member Cuellar, it is at every stage of the apprehension, removal process, and everything in between that we would need resources. More Border Patrol agents, more support personnel so we can ensure that those Border Patrol agents are out in the field doing the enforcement work that they signed up and for which they are so skilled to perform. More asylum officers, more immigration and customs enforcement personnel, more detention capacity, more funds for alternatives to detention, more transportation resources, including more resources to be able to execute more removal flights, more legislative authorities so that we can actually fund other countries in enforcing their borders and removing people from their countries before they ever reach the southern border of the United States.
And my time's up, but I do want to emphasize what you said. Expedited removal is only if you have somebody in detention, and if they're out.
We're here today to celebrate bipartisan legislation that was signed into law in December of last year that will expedite building new bridges and expanding bridges between Texas and Mexico. We're here at the World Trade Bridge, the largest land port in the United States. Every year, Texas and Mexico have roughly $800 billion in trade and commerce that comes across this border. That's jobs in Texas. That's jobs in Mexico. That's the lifeblood of South Texas. And unfortunately, for the past 3 years, expansion of these bridges has been delayed in bureaucratic roadblocks. In March of 2021, I sat down in my office in D.C. with city leaders from Laredo who came to me with a problem. The problem they described is they were trying to expand this bridge, expand it from 8 lanes to what will be a total of 18 lanes. But they were running into difficulty getting the presidential permit. To build any bridge in America, you have to go through what's called NEPA environmental review. But to build a bridge across a border to another nation, you also need a permit from the President of the United States. Now, previously, the way those permits had been granted is they would be granted contingent on the completion of the environmental review, and doing that expedites the process. It lets you move forward quickly. Unfortunately, the Biden administration, when they came into power, they reversed that. And they announced they would grant 0 presidential permits for new bridges until all of the environmental reviews had been entirely completed. By flipping the order, they delayed every one of these projects by several years. Now, I got to say, in March of 2021, when the city leaders of Laredo brought this up to me, it seemed like something that should have an easy solution. It made no sense what was happening. And I thought then that this could perhaps be fixed by a simple phone call to the State Department, by imploring someone to engage in common sense. That, as it so happened, did not get the job done. So then we went to work, building a bipartisan coalition. I worked hand in hand with Henry Cuellar, who together we assembled a group of unanimous support from the Texas congressional delegation. So John Cornyn and I together in the Senate worked hand in hand. And then in the House, you had Henry Cuellar, a Democrat, Monica de la Cruz, a Republican, Vicente Gonzalez, a Democrat, and Tony Gonzalez, a Republican. All of us came together and urged the Biden administration, change this policy that makes no sense and is hurting Texas. Unfortunately, the administration ignored our request, essentially said, go jump in a lake. So then we began drafting legislation. We drafted legislation. I introduced it in the Senate. To expedite these bridges, we had it adopted in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It was then attached to the National Defense Authorization Committee, National Defense Authorization Act. And I will tell you, in the journey to getting it across the finish line, there were about a dozen times this legislation was at risk of being stripped out. Henry and I worked the phones day and night, talking to members, Republicans and Democrats, laying out the case, building the support. The legislation passed the Senate, it passed the House, and President Biden signed it into law on December 22nd of last year. December 22nd happens to be my birthday. So it was a fabulous birthday present. And under the terms of the legislation, on December 22nd, a shot clock starts. Starting on that day, the State Department has 60 days to submit its recommendation to the President of the United States. At the end of the 60 days, a second shot clock starts. And the President of the United States has 60 days to grant the permit. And if the President does not act, at the expiration of those 60 days, the permit is deemed granted automatically by operation of law. That means with the clock starting on December 22nd, on April 20th, the two shot clocks expire. And on April 20th, we will have a decision. We will have the presidential permit to go forward, which means this bridge, and not just this bridge, but bridges in Webb County here, in Cameron County, and Maverick County, bridges all along the Rio Grande River, 4 different bridge projects that now will have the green light to go forward. This is a win for Texas farmers and ranchers. This is a win for Texas small businesses and manufacturers. This is a win for jobs. This is thousands of jobs here in South Texas and all across Texas. This is also a win for national security. One of the things we're seeing is we're seeing more and more onshoring and nearshoring of manufacturing coming from China, some of it coming back to the United States, some of it coming to Mexico. Our close friend and ally, and bringing that manufacturing back to North America is unequivocally good for U.S. national security, making us less dependent on China. And this is a win for the environment. Right now, on any given day, you can go south of the border, and you could see a line of 18-wheelers sometimes extending 4, 5, 6 miles, sitting there for hours on end, spewing pollution into the air. That's not good for the environment. It's much better for the environment to have enough lanes open, enough bridges open, that the trade and commerce can move quickly and expeditiously. That makes more sense all around. So we're here to celebrate a tremendous bipartisan victory, a victory for Texas, and I want to thank all of the stakeholders who are here. The community in Laredo worked hard to make this happen, and all throughout South Texas, stakeholders have been involved. I appreciate the leadership, and the leadership is how we got to where we are today. With that, I give you my friend, Henry Cuellar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Senator, first of all, I want to thank Senator Cruz for the work that he's done. If you want to see bipartisanship, this is the type of bipartisan work that gets the job done. So, Senator, thank you so much for your work. This is the type of news that we want to see here at the border, legitimate trade and tourism and the efficiency of moving this. I also want to thank, I know I have a statement from Senator Cornyn. I want to thank Senator Cornyn, Vicente Gonzalez, Monica de la Cruz, Tony Gonzalez, and the other folks that worked on it on a bipartisan. But again, the legislation on the Senate side was done by Senator Cruz. Thank you so much. And again, we're able to get this across the House side. Let me just talk about a couple of things that are important. This legislation that the senator said starts a time clock. Let me give you an example. When we did the second bridge, the Kansas City bridge that's being built right now, which will be ready by December of this year, it was done the way this legislation was done. That is, you file the paperwork, you file the application, you get started, you do the permit, you do the environmental before the construction. This is what this legislation, and that's why that rail bridge is going to be done by December. It's fast track, and we're going to move everything fast track now. So why is this legislation important? Well, first of all, it's important to understand, and I think you have all the private sectors here, is it's important because last year we had more than $863 billion of trade between the U.S. and Mexico. That's over $1.5 million every single minute. Just think about it. Every single minute, $1.5 billion. This Laredo sector handles over 40% of all the trade between the U.S. and Mexico. Now, this legislation will be good for, it covers 3 counties, Brownsville, Cameron, Webb County, and Maverick County, all the way up to this year, December 24. So it's good for the bridges, but let me just mention this area here. The World Trade Bridge is the #1. Let's look at the Texas perspective. El Paso all the way to Brownsville. World Trade Bridge is #1. Columbia in Texas is #2. So right here in Webb County, you have #1 and #2 for the whole state of Texas. When you look at the southern border, the World Trade Bridge is #1, and the Columbia Bridge is #3. And we feel the way Columbia is growing, in the next 2-3 years, it will be #2. So Webb County will have #1 and #2 in the whole southern border. And this is why the legislation Senator Cruz and us worked on it is so important, because we need to expand the bridges that we have. Now, infrastructure, again, is important. This Laredo sector received about $1.9 billion. So the work that we're doing on the Mines Road and the access by Asios and the other roads that we're doing, the money's there. It's a matter of getting that constructed. So this money for construction is important. You got to expand the bridges, but you got to have infrastructure. And along with that, something that Senator Cruz and myself and Cornyn worked on was I-27. Laredo is the only port in the whole country that has Highway 2, which is 83 down to the south, Highway 69, which is so important for the Houston area. And that way, I-35, and I keep reminding our folks that receive billions of dollars in Austin, is that it's I-35 needs to be expanded. They're doing a good job from San Antonio up to Dallas in that area. That's good. But remember, as I told some of my friends up there in Austin, the trucks here in Laredo don't jump 150 miles to San Antonio. We got to expand I-35 also the way we're doing in San Antonio and beyond that. And the other work is I-27 that will open it up to Maverick County, to West Texas, to oil and gas, the ag area in the West Texas. So I-27, I-35, I-69, and I-2 is so important to our area. So that's the work that we have that's so important. So it's this permitting, fast tracking, it's the infrastructure, and the men and women in blue. We've been adding money for the men and women in blue. We saw some of the custom brokers over there. We've added more money. Technology, the new machines are coming in that will expedite where we can secure things that are coming into the United States, but still move this along. Then finally, we're going to hear from our good friends, the governor from Tamaulipas, Americo, and I want to thank him for the work that he's doing on his side. It's very important, but one of the things he's going to mention that we know Mexico is doing two things. They are putting $800 million to buy the same equipment that we use on the U.S. side. It said, according to Almo, he told me it was $800 million to provide that. If they put more money, that's good. But that's important because they're buying the same equipment that we use over here. So that means that they'll be able to talk. And the other thing is the National Customs, and the governor were talking about this, the National Customs headquarters will be moved from Mexico, DF, to Nuevo Laredo. So think what happens when you move over here. So with that, I want to thank the governor for the work that he's doing, to make sure that we expedite that. So at this time, Américo Villarreal, the governor of Tamaulipas, thank you for being here. Bienvenidos, un abrazo, saludos de Laredo, Texas.
Pues muy buenos días, es un gusto estar nuevamente aquí con ustedes, deseándoles un feliz inicio de año 2024, muy promisorio con lo que estuvimos viendo el día de hoy en esta reunión, en que apreciamos el trabajo de los senadores Horner, Cruz, Henry Cuellar, en el sentido de la legislación que hacen en la Unión Americana para poder acelerar los trabajos de las expansiones de los puentes fronterizos que estrechan a nuestras naciones en lazos de cooperación económica, social y de oportunidades de bienestar y desarrollo para nuestra gente. Me da mucho gusto pues escuchar esta legislación y estos plazos que establece esta nueva ley que ha sido aprobada para poder tener una definición pronta en la oportunidad de seguir incrementando esta infraestructura que ya ha sido ampliamente comentada por lo que está haciendo en la Unión Americana. Lo mismo del lado de nuestra nación. En México hemos comentado que hay una total disposición entre los niveles de participación de un gobierno municipal o de un condado, y que también desde el punto de vista de los estados, que estamos implicados en ello, y el impacto que esto tiene a nivel nacional de nuestros dos países, haciendo que en este momento este puente de libre comercio es la principal fuente de comercio terrestre vía tractocamión entre nuestras dos naciones, teniendo el 40-41% del comercio entre México y Estados Unidos y como primer lugar. Y también a través de los vía ferroviaria que hay entre Tamaulipas y la Unión Americana, el 54% del comercio a través del tren se realiza a través de la frontera de Tamaulipas. Hay una gran inversión con esta visión del gobierno federal en nuestra frontera, en que se han modernizado nuestras 5 aduanas, de las cuales dependen los 18 puentes fronterizos que tenemos en común, sobre todo este de Nuevo Laredo, donde acabamos hace 2 semanas de inaugurar infraestructura física de seguridad para la frontera tamaulipeca, y que el próximo septiembre de este año está el compromiso, como ya se comentó, de tener la Dirección General de Aduanas Nacional aquí en el sitio donde se lleva el mayor intercambio comercial entre México y Estados Unidos, en Nuevo Laredo, y eso le va a dar una dimensión y un crecimiento, pues como decimos, exponencial, un crecimiento de escala a tanto Nuevo Laredo como a Laredo, Texas, que tienen tantas situaciones en común. Y se tiene también un gran desarrollo de infraestructura, un gran esfuerzo que ha hecho el gobierno federal en las demás aduanas en cuanto a tecnología, en cuanto a presencia de equipos de radiología para verificar las cargas y, y tener los procedimientos acordes entre los dos países, que no solo dependa de infraestructura, sino también de procesos, el estar agilizando nuestro intercambio comercial. Estamos nosotros con toda la disposición, con el conocimiento pleno de nuestras autoridades federales y de las instancias de las secretarías implícitas en este tipo de procedimientos y de desarrollo de infraestructura a nivel nacional, y pues del lado mexicano estamos listos para poder tener e iniciar esta infraestructura a la brevedad posible y con toda la disposición para que podamos gestionar y facilitar las circunstancias que se nos vayan presentando en el camino, pero con un proyecto que ya mencionó muy bien el senador Cruz, en el sentido en que todos ganamos. Ganan los municipios, los condados, los estados y las naciones en una gran oportunidad de desarrollo y seguir superando lo que la historia nos ha venido compartiendo a lo largo de estas dos grandes naciones. Es un gusto estar aquí con ustedes. ¡Bravo!
Good morning, everyone. We want to thank you from the state of Nuevo León to Senator Ted Cruz and Henry Cuellar. Nuevo León has so many similarities with Texas. We are the engine of Mexico. Texas is the engine of the U.S. That's why the connectivity between Nuevo León and Texas has to be permanently. That's why we're working very hard in the Columbia Bridge to make it the safest and the most fast crossing between Mexico and the U.S. We're very excited with the numbers that CBP has given us. We're the number 2 land port already. Webb County has 2 borders with Tamaulipas and with Nuevo León. So Governor Samuel Garcia sends his blessing, sends his hello, and we will continue working immediately. As of today, we have the meeting, Henry, at 1 p.m. with the city manager to start getting all the paperwork together so we can take advantage of that law that Senator Ted Cruz and you promoted, so we can comply in time and we can have the permit ready by the end of this year, and Laredo and Colombia, Nuevo Laredo, will be the most important region of all the world in international trade. Thank you.
Yeah, could I have both of you?
All right. Good morning, Dr. Victor Trevino, Mayor for the City of Laredo. And it is a pleasure to be here in this event, looking at all the progress that will be made. And thank you, Congressman Cuellar and Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, thank you very much for everything. And all the invitees, all the officials that are here. Very important event. And we are here to talk for a win of Laredo, for the state of Texas, and for the United States as a whole. As Port of Laredo is expected to exceed $300 billion in trade this year, as the largest port in the country, the World Trade Bridge expansion doesn't just stand alone. It represents a global seat at the table of the United States, and with Mexico as trade partners to influence trade policy around the world from a position of strength and prosperity. I also have to say, there is no better way to reinforce our border security through financial collaboration, commerce, and infrastructure. So on behalf of the City of Laredo, I want to thank Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, and Congressman Cuellar for their relentless bipartisan support in passing legislation to establish a streamlined process and timeline for our presidential permit application and pave the way for a World Trade Bridge expansion project. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the officials and everybody that came here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn Hammer, President and CEO of the Texas Association of Business. I want to first start by thanking Senator Cruz and Congressman Cuellar for their incredible bipartisan work, as well as for the other members of the congressional delegation in Texas, including Senator Cornyn, for getting this over the finish line. This is a great initiative for Laredo. It's a great initiative for the state of Texas. It's a great initiative for the entire United States of America, for our friend, ally, and neighbor Mexico, and for the world's most important trading bloc, North America, and our friends in Canada. This is the most significant effort to increase commerce since the passage of the USMCA. As was mentioned, over $850 billion of goods go through, are traded between Mexico and the United States. 81% go through the state of Texas. So making sure that we could speed up the arteries of trade is vitally important. So with Mexico now our #1 trading partner, that's good news. I think all of us here would agree we would much rather see Mexico as our top trading partner than, say, China. This shot clock that is now running, and it needs to run on December 22nd. If it's Senator Cruz's birthday, that sounds like the right day to start it. And I know Jerry Schwebel, who's going to speak in a moment, it's his birthday. But again, this is the most important development to December 22nd is his birthday. This is the most important development in increasing legal trade since the passage of USMCA. The entire Texas business community is in full support, and we're going to do everything possible as well to build up the infrastructure. And Congressman Cuellar, your message is received on the importance to make sure that I-35 is expanded, given that trucks at this point in time can't jump 150 miles. Muchas gracias, and it was great to also be here with our great friends from Nuevo Leon and Governor Villarreal, who was at our Texas State Chamber addressing one of our board meetings. It's great to see you again as well. Muchas gracias.
Morning, everybody. Jerry Maldonado, Chairman of the Board for the Laredo Motor Carriers Association. And we're here to basically echo what's been said already. From the transportation community, we want to say thank you. We want to say thank you to our leaders, thank you to our elected officials, Congressman Cuellar, Senator Cruz, and Senator Cornyn, for everything that they do and they have done up until today to get us to where we are. This is a huge win, as they said earlier. You know, international trade is what keeps Texas moving forward. It's what keeps the United States moving forward every single day. And the expansion of the bridges here in Laredo, in World Trade Bridge and Columbia Bridge, is of significant benefit to our truck drivers. If you turn to your left, my right, you will see our drivers every day. This is the job. This is what they do. This is how they make a living. And the faster and safer we can get them to cross from Mexico to U.S. or from the U.S. to Mexico, the better it is for everything. How does that help the normal person, you and I, every day? Well, the goods get to where we go and buy them every single day, to the stores, groceries, you know, the furniture stores, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to leave with one message. When you see a driver out on the road, please thank a driver when you see him on the road. They're doing a job that helps every single one of us. And again, you know, thank you to our leadership. Thank you to the government of Nuevo Leon. Thank you to the government of Tamaulipas for working together with us. The transportation industry is huge supporters of all of the men that are behind me, and we will continue to support our leadership that is there to support the business moving forward and the transportation community to continue to succeed. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Jerry Schwebel.
Happy birthday, Senator. I just realized that we share the same birthday, but there's another important date that we also must remember. January 1 of 2024 was the 30th anniversary of the implementation of the North American Free Trade Agreement that transformed the border of the United States with Mexico into what we are seeing today. These trucks are music to our ears. These trucks are what provide, as Jerry said, all that 40% of trade and volume that comes through this port. For those of us that worked hand in hand with many of my friends that are here today, both public and private sector, hand in hand, to share the importance that trade is good. Trade is good for Texas. Trade is good for the United States and Mexico, the whole North American region. This is what it's all about. This is the kind of news we should be talking about in regards to the border. This is a win for the whole North American region, and we want to thank the bipartisan efforts, Senator Cruz, Congressman Cuellar, all the members of Congress, the coalition, from Monica de la Cruz to Vicente Gonzalez, all the way up and down Senator Cornyn. It goes to show you that really bipartisanship does work, and we all of us win from that. So we're lucky that we live in Texas. Those of us that live and work here in Laredo, Texas, are lucky that we live and work in Laredo, Texas as well. We're here to say thank you to everyone that played whatever role it played in making this happen, because these members of Congress are members that actually take action and execute. Don't promise, they execute. And this is an effort of where we can see how good things can happen. So this is the kind of news we talk about: infrastructure expansion, facilitation of the flow of commerce, supply chain network connectivity, not bridge closures, but opening more channels of this flow of commerce. So we're here all together, united, to thank our members of Congress, Senate, as well as the House, working hand in hand with our friends from Mexico, because our connectivity means that we have to work in hand in that infrastructure of bipartisanship and binationalism. So thank you, celebrate today because it is, and let's focus on the great news and the great efforts of what these members of Congress are doing with this legislation. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
So now we're happy to take any questions on these issues. Yes, sir.
DGNS, hi, sir. We know that this is a great deal for Mexico. However, there's two challenges that y'all need to face, which is migration and, of course, security, especially on the Mexican side. How is it that you and, of course, state leaders, federal leaders are going to tackle this?
Well, border security is an issue that is incredibly important. I spend a lot of time on it, but I want to keep today focused on the topic of this event, which is the legislation that was just signed into law that is going to produce thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of commerce for the state of Texas and for South Texas in particular.
Can we get clarification on the shot clock that went into law today?
December 22nd is when the shot clock started. So that's when President Biden signed the legislation. So the shot clock started on December 22nd. You have 60 days from that point for the State Department to issue its recommendation to the White House. At the end of those 60 days, the second shot clock starts, and the president has 60 days to grant the permit. If the president doesn't act at the end of those 60 days, the permit is deemed automatically granted by operation of law, so that takes you to April 20th.
So are we allowed to start constructing and expanding now, or have to wait until April 22nd?
Well, April 20th, we will have the presidential permit. At that point, the projects will still go forward. Look, part of getting the projects is getting the financing in place. One of the reasons that the bureaucratic delay slowed these projects down is that the sponsors of the bridges were finding it much harder to get financing without the presidential permit in place. And so that slows the project down. There's still planning, and you still have to go through the environmental review, but you could move forward the presidential permit was the major impediment that was starting the process from going forward.
One thing highly touted in this new law is the fact that it is bipartisan. And, we've heard time and time again, what will it take for there to be bipartisan discussions with the border? A lot of us were down in Eagle Pass yesterday when a group of House Republicans went to tour the border. We asked them that same question, what it will take, because we know there are discussions about how we can address the situation at the border. But how can you take the two government partners who brought money together from different parties, different chambers, and put that into a potentially more laws?
Well, look, when it comes to border security, there is a very sharp disagreement between the Biden administration and I think most Texans. And what's happening on border security is catastrophic. I am not optimistic that we will see the White House move its position on that point. And it is frustrating and maddening given the human suffering that is playing out with what's happening on our border. But again, I want to keep the focus of this. I'm engaged in border security every day, so I'm more than happy to talk about that at length in another context. But we should keep the focus where this press conference is designed to be.
Senator Cruz, in November, Customs and Border Protection shut down 4 ports of entry, diverting personnel. If we expand lanes, are we training personnel even more so?
Well, look, obviously when you expand lanes and expand commerce, you've got to have the personnel to deal with that commerce as well. And so that's part of the issue that unquestionably needs to happen. Unfortunately, the administration did it again in December, shutting down rail lines between Texas and Mexico. That was completely unacceptable, completely unjustifiable. Both Henry and I spoke out vigorously against it, and in fact, we agreed today to work together to try to stop that from happening again, because it's incredibly harmful to commerce between our two countries. Henry, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I sit as the ranking Democrat on Homeland Appropriations. This current year, we added more monies for CBP officers, men and women in blue. It's not only in green, but also men and women in blue. We added money for technology. We also added what we call the coordinators, support staff, because I don't think Border Patrol or CBP, men and women in blue, should be changing diapers, should be making sandwiches for migrants, and that's what we have that support staff to do that. So we have that appropriations. As you know, the current appropriations, we are adding more, but we're still waiting to work this out. The House and the Senate will get together on that. But the other thing is there's two things that I think are detrimental to trade, in my opinion. One is when they move the men and women in blue and close up lanes. I know we have the Maverick judge over here. He saw what happened in Maverick County and other places. We don't need to move the men and women in blue to do that, number one. Number two, quite honestly, to be fair, the governors, when he does the inspections, keep in mind, I used to do the DPS budget when I was in the State House. They don't have the power to open up trucks. So they have zero drugs and zero migrants because they cannot open. So those two things, moving the men and women in blue is not helpful. Doing the inspections to check for migrants or drugs is not helpful. And I think those two things should stop, and we should let the legitimate trade and tourism, and hopefully in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we'll go from $863 billion between the U.S. and Mexico to $1 trillion, and that means jobs over there and over here, especially Texas.
So, someone want to address the financing of the bridge?
This is a public sector finance. I think one of the unique, this is Jerry Shovel again, one of the uniqueness about some of these projects that we're looking at, we understand that there's limited funds available. So some of these projects are a true private-public partnership initiative. And I think that's the other element that sometimes gets forgotten, where the private sector wants to work with the public sector and say, hey, let us share in the sources of those funding so we can facilitate and speed up the process and work hand in hand with what our members of Congress have to go out there and get appropriations, but let the private sector also be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
If
There is, yeah,
Go ahead.
Look, on the funding, it depends on every bridge. You could have a city involved, you can have a county involved. On the Mexican side, they got to deal with that, but NatBank has funded some of those bridges also on the Mexican side, so there's different ways of doing that. But the public-private partnership is something that we started back in 2014 to allow the private sector to provide some work on that. One of the things I want to work with the senator is expanding that from OFO, because right now it only allows the bridges. But let me tell you something. In Brownsville, SpaceX is saying, hey, we'll bill you this, Border Patrol, for the checkpoint, but you got to be able to accept it. So one of the things I want to do is change the law, or we'll change the law together, bipartisan, to allow that checkpoint in SpaceX and also the checkpoint over here in Laredo. This checkpoint, outside of Laredo, if it was a bridge, it would be the 4th largest bridge in the whole country. The 4th largest bridge. So we need to have public or private partnership, not only for OFO, which is men and women in blue, but also the men and women for trade on those checkpoints.
Al gobernador de Tamaulipas, Américo Villarreal, y a la alcaldesa, ¿cómo están preparándose para infraestructura ahora que empiece a funcionar la nueva aduana?
Bueno, gracias por la pregunta, hay un gran desarrollo. Estamos, como diciendo, complementando infraestructura carretera para que se llegue con mayor facilidad a la frontera en Nuevo Laredo, nuevas desviaciones de tráfico pesado para que accedan más pronto al puente de libre comercio, y también estamos haciendo mejora infraestructura municipal, las mismas instalaciones de la Dirección General de Aduanas, y eso implica, como decíamos, economías de escala, en las cuales ya se están viendo el tener nuevas unidades hospitalarias, nuevos recursos de los municipios para tener también el recurso humano que será necesario atender para poder tener toda esta capacidad de operación hacia este gran proyecto de la Dirección General de Aduanas en Nuevo Laredo. También comentarles que en ese sentido hay un gran impulso para poder favorecer el nearshoring en nuevas empresas, maquiladoras del lado mexicano, que están muy interesadas, y hemos tenido contacto con ellos para poder tener un desarrollo también económico en este aspecto. Están en la construcción, el desarrollo de vivienda y todo lo que son estos servicios municipales recientemente, y también con un apoyo tripartita, con el apoyo del gobierno federal, el gobierno del estado, municipal y el NatBank. Estamos rehabilitando al 100% la planta PITAR, la planta de tratamiento de aguas residuales internacional, para que el 100% ahora sí de las aguas negras de Nuevo Laredo salgan totalmente tratadas, son parte de la infraestructura que se está haciendo. Y en el caso del desarrollo del puente, nosotros contamos con el respaldo federal, el respaldo del gobierno municipal, y también este puente tiene un fideicomiso en donde se ha ido depositando paulatinamente parte de todas las cuotas de tránsito por el mismo puente, y tiene la solvencia económica para poder enfrentar este proyecto.
Thank you, everyone.